The very first thing I saw was Mark's face. He looked pale and angry, whispering at me through tight teeth. "You're 17 minutes late, Chloe. 17. That's how the whole thing started. It was the most embarrassing and amazing night of my whole life. It was the night I walked into a huge, fancy house, expecting everyone to judge me. Instead, I walked out having learned the very lesson I had always tried to teach other people. But before I got there, before the shiny marble floors and the angry whispers, it all began with a simple email. That email changed everything. It showed up on a gloomy Wednesday afternoon. I was at my job at the non-profit organization, just finishing my paperwork. The email subject just said, "Formal dinner invitation. You must attend." At first I thought it was just junk mail, but then I saw who sent it. Vance and Associates, attorneys. I remember just staring at the email. The normal sounds of the office around me seemed to go quiet. This email wasn't really an invitation. It felt more like a court order. It was just one cold sentence. It said that Mrs. Eleanor Vance, Mark's mother, wanted her son and his girlfriend, Miss Chloe Martin, to come to a formal dinner at her home. It didn't ask us to reply, and it wasn't friendly. It was just an order from a woman who, I guess, had the power to decide if my relationship with Mark would last. Mark had tried to warn me. "My mother isn't a relaxed person," he'd told me. "To her, everything you do is a test." He said it like someone who had spent his whole life trying not to step on hidden bombs, totally scared of making a mistake. That night, while we were eating takeout and drinking coffee that wasn't very warm, he gave me a piece of paper. It was a list of actual rules for how to get through the dinner. "Don't talk about your job at the nonprofit," the list said. "She thinks charity is for people who can't succeed in the real business world. Don't bring up your parents. They're too normal. Only talk about safe things, like art or maybe the economy. You must be exactly on time. Not early, and definitely not late. Wear that blue dress I got for you, and wear the scarf." He kept saying, "the scarf." He said it like the scarf was a suit of armor, like that piece of expensive fabric could protect me from her judgment. I tried to laugh about it, but I could see in his eyes that he was completely serious. For the 2 years we'd been together, Mark always seemed to feel two things: love and fear. He loved me, but he was terrified of his mother. He told me stories about how mean she could be. He said she had made grown businessmen so nervous they couldn't even talk straight just by looking at them. "She doesn't just judge you," he said. "She takes you apart, piece by piece." The week leading up to the dinner was just a blur of worry. I went to my job like usual. I visited shelters for local veterans and checked on older people in their homes, but my brain was somewhere else. Every time I looked in a mirror, I felt like I was on trial. Every outfit I tried on seemed like a bad choice. I really loved my job at Hopeful Homes, a small charity in our city that helped families and veterans who were having a hard time find a place to live. It wasn't a fancy job, but it was good, honest work. I had seen more true goodness in the eyes of a person who had nothing left than I ever saw in the fake smiles of rich people at big parties. But I knew Eleanor wouldn't see it like that. By Friday afternoon, I had everything planned out completely. My train was at 3:45. The taxi was for 4:35. I would arrive at 4:50 exactly. Dinner was at 5:00. I even printed out the directions, just in case my phone battery died. I ironed my blue dress, shined my shoes, and wrapped the scarf carefully around my neck. The scarf felt soft and very expensive, and it wasn't like me at all. Mark said his mother would like the nice detail. I wanted to tell him that his mother might also like a person who helps people who could never own such a nice scarf. But I kept that thought to myself. When I looked at myself in the mirror right before I left, I almost didn't know the person looking back at me. Everything looked perfect and neat. Every detail was planned. But underneath that perfect look, my stomach was turning over and over. I got on the 3:45 train, and my heart was pounding every time we stopped. Outside the window, the countryside rushed by in a blur of green and gold. I tried to breathe slowly. "It's just a dinner," I kept telling myself. "It's just dinner." I got to the small train station in the suburbs and still had 15 minutes left. The air was cool and crisp. It smelled a little like burning wood and freshly cut grass. There was a taxi waiting right there, but for some reason, I didn't get in. I just needed a minute. I needed to breathe and to walk and to think. I needed to feel something besides being scared. So I started walking toward the big house. The neighborhood was like a different planet. The streets had tall trees, huge iron gates, and front yards so big you could fit my whole apartment building in one of them. I held tightly to the flowers I had bought for Eleanor. White lilies. I thought they looked simple, but nice. After walking for about 10 minutes, I passed a little grocery store on the corner of Maple Street and Oak Avenue. In the store window, there were pumpkins and signs for Thanksgiving. It made the world feel simple and nice. I suddenly remembered I didn't have a gift bag for the flowers. I decided to go inside quickly to see if I could find one. The line to pay was moving very slowly. The air was filled with the beep-beep of the scanners and the sound of shopping carts. That's when I saw her. There was an older woman at the front of the line. She was digging through her purse, saying she was sorry as her coins fell out onto the counter. The cashier sounded annoyed. "Ma'am, you don't have enough money," he said. "The total is 147.6." The woman's voice was shaking. "I really thought my card would work for it," she said. The people in line behind her started to move around and sigh. I looked at my watch. It was 4:44. I could still get there on time if I left right now. But then I looked back at the woman. Her hands were shaking. She was wearing an old coat and shoes that looked like they had been through many cold winters. Her eyes, which looked tired but very kind, met mine for just 1 second. Something inside me just broke. I didn't even think. I just moved forward. "It's all right," I said in a quiet voice. "I'll pay for it." The woman stopped moving. "Oh no, dear. You can't do that." "It's okay," I said again. "Please." The cashier swiped my credit card before she could say no again. The receipt said $152. The woman looked at me, totally confused. Tears started to form in her eyes. "People just don't do things like that anymore," she whispered. I smiled at her. "Well, they should." I gave her the receipt and moved out of the way. I suddenly remembered the time. It was 4:49. My heart jumped. I was officially late. I ran out of the store. The flowers were in my hand, and the scarf was flying in the wind. I didn't know it yet, but that small thing I did had just changed my whole life. If I've learned one thing from my job helping the community, it's that your plans don't mean anything when life shows up to test what you really believe in. And that afternoon, in the middle of a grocery store, life decided to test me. The clock on my phone said 4:41 p.m. I still thought I could get to the Vance estate on time. The train station wasn't even a mile away, and the cool fall air helped calm me down. I had just bought a small bunch of lilies. I hoped they would be a good peace offering for the scary woman I was about to meet. As I walked, the world around me seemed too perfect. It didn't look real. There were white fences, perfect green lawns, and mailboxes that looked like tiny mansions. Even the air smelled rich. But inside, my thoughts were spinning around like a storm. Every single thing Mark had said that week kept playing in my head. She hates when people are late. Never talk about your charity job. Everything is a test. I kept saying those rules over and over, like a prayer, hoping they would keep me safe. That's when I saw the small grocery store. It was a local place called the Corner Market. Its windows were full of pies and decorations for Thanksgiving. I saw some gift bags near the door and remembered the flowers in my hand. My mother always used to say, "A gift looks naked without a bag." So I went inside. The store was warm and bright. It was filled with the normal, quiet sounds of everyday life, carts rolling, registers beeping, and a quiet song playing on the radio. It felt like a completely different world from the fancy house I was about to walk into. I found a simple silver gift bag, paid for it, and was just about to leave. That's when I heard a voice in front of me. It was soft, shaky, and full of apologies. "I'm so sorry, sir. I really thought my card would work." At the checkout, an older woman was standing there, holding just a few groceries: milk, bread, apples, and a small frozen turkey. The cashier looked bored and impatient. "Ma'am, the total is $147.86, he said in a flat voice. "You don't have enough." The woman opened her old wallet again, and her fingers were shaking. She looked around, embarrassed. I can put something back," she whispered. The line behind her started to get restless. Someone sighed very loudly. I just stood there. My heart started beating faster, not because I was being judged, but because I knew this feeling. I had seen this exact scene so many times at my job, the quiet, desperate feeling of someone having to choose between their dignity and food. My first instinct was to help her. But then Mark's voice cut into my thoughts like a knife. "Don't be late. Don't look weak. She will never forgive you." I looked at my phone. It was 4:46. I had 14 minutes. 14 minutes to either protect my future or be a good person. My hand held the flowers tightly. My stomach felt sick. I could feel the two parts of me fighting. The old part, the one that always wants to help, was fighting with the new part, the one that was afraid of being judged. Then I looked at her face. I didn't look at her shaking hands or her old coat. I looked at her eyes. They were a clear, pale blue, like the sky just before dark. She still had her dignity. She wasn't asking for help. She just looked tired of being invisible. That's what made me decide. I stepped forward. "It's okay," I said quietly, taking out my credit card. "I'll pay for it." The cashier blinked, surprised. The woman gasped. No, dear. I can't let you do that." "It's fine," I said with a smile. "We all need a little help sometimes." The cashier just shrugged, swiped my card, and said, "It's approved. $150, $12. The woman turned to me, and her voice was breaking. "You don't even know me." "I don't need to," I said. She reached out and squeezed my hand. Her skin felt cool, and her hand was shaking. "People don't usually notice anymore," she whispered. "Thank you." I nodded, feeling a lump in my throat. "Take care of yourself." When I got outside, the sun was lower in the sky, and the air was getting cold. I looked at my phone. 4:52. Panic hit me. I was late. I was really late. I started to jog down the quiet street. The flowers were pressed against my chest, and my scarf was flying behind me. I realized how strange this was. I spend every day of my life trying to teach people to be kind, and the one time I really do it, it might cost me everything. But a part of me felt strangely peaceful, like something inside me had finally clicked into place. The walk to the big house felt dreamlike. Tall trees made long shadows, and the sound of traffic faded away. I could see the gates to the house up ahead. They were made of black iron and gold, and they looked like they were judging me. For a second, I started to doubt myself. What if Mark was right? What if his mother just saw me as a silly, emotional person? Just another charity case wearing nice shoes? But then I thought about the woman's eyes, and how they looked when I paid for her food. I thought about how kindness made her feel less embarrassed. I fixed my scarf, lifted my head, and kept walking. The driveway to the Vance house seemed to go on forever. It was lined with tall bushes and marble statues that seemed to be watching me. The air got colder and smelled like pine trees and money. When I finally got to the front steps, Mark was walking back and forth outside, looking at his watch. He looked up and stopped when he saw me. His face went from being relieved to being furious in just 1 second. "Chloe, what happened? Where were you?" I tried to catch my breath. "I walked. There was a woman at the store." He cut me off. "You're late. Do you have any idea what this means?" I opened my mouth, but I couldn't say anything. My scarf slipped off my shoulder a little bit as he looked at me, totally annoyed. "You look a mess," he said. "And where's the scarf I told you to wear?" I blinked, confused. Then I realized I had wrapped it around the old woman's shoulders when I left the store. "I gave it away," I said quietly. "She was cold." Mark's face twisted up. "You gave away a $700 scarf to a stranger? Right before meeting my mother?" I felt hurt by his words, but under his anger I saw something else. I saw fear. He was afraid of what his mother would think. He was afraid of not being good enough. "I'm sorry," I said softly. I couldn't just walk past her." He let out a sharp breath and ran his hand through his hair. "You don't get it, Chloe. My mother doesn't forgive mistakes. And now you're walking in late, and you're missing the one thing that made you look like you belong here." His words hurt a lot. But this time, something inside me didn't want to back down. If helping someone made me look bad, then maybe I was okay with looking bad. I followed him up the steps. My heart was pounding, and the flowers were shaking a little in my hand. The huge, heavy oak doors were right in front of us, polished perfectly. As the butler opened them, I saw my reflection in the glass. I didn't look like the perfect woman Mark had tried to create. I looked like someone who had chosen to be kind instead of being on time. And deep down, I really hoped that choice still meant something in this world. Mark's fingers grabbed my wrist tightly as the butler walked away. His voice was quiet, but it was sharp. 17 minutes, Chloe. Do you even know what you've done?" His words bounced off the walls of the giant marble entrance hall. I could hear the soft tick-tock of a big, old clock somewhere in the house. I could smell floor polish, money, and fear. It was the kind of fear you feel when you're about to disappoint someone powerful. "I told you, she judges everything," Mark whispered angrily. "The first impression is the only thing that matters to her. You might as well have just walked in with no shoes on." I opened my mouth to try to explain, but he wouldn't let me. "And where is the scarf? No, don't tell me." I paused, holding the flowers closer. I gave it to someone who needed it more than I did. His eyes got wide, like I had just told him I committed a crime. "A stranger. On the street. I can't believe you." "Mark," I started to say, trying to be careful. "She was freezing. I couldn't just—" "You could have thought for once. This isn't one of your charity projects, Chloe. This is my mother." His words hurt. It wasn't just that they were mean, it was because they showed me the truth. At some point, Mark had stopped thinking that kindness was a good thing. He saw it as a weakness, something I should hide and be sorry for. I looked at him. I mean, really looked at him. I saw the scared little boy hiding inside the expensive suit. I saw the man who had spent his whole life trying to make someone happy, who never seemed to smile. "I'm sorry," I said quietly. "But if your mother can't forgive me for being late because I was helping someone, then maybe this dinner shows who she is, not who I am." He looked hurt. "Don't say that, Chloe. Please, just let me be the one to talk tonight." The butler came back. "Mrs. Vance will see you now." The words sounded like a judge's final decision. We followed him down a long hallway. The walls were covered with paintings of serious-looking men and fancy women. They all seemed to be watching us with cold eyes. Every step I took seemed to echo loudly. I felt like I was breaking into a museum where everyone was being judged. The dining room doors opened without a sound. It was like walking into a different time. A huge, sparkling chandelier hung over a long, dark wood table set for 3 people. The forks and knives shined. A fire was burning in the marble fireplace, but it felt like it was just for decoration, not for warmth. And at the other end of the table, she sat. Eleanor Vance. She was older than I thought she would be, maybe in her late 60s, but she was very impressive. Her silver hair was pulled back perfectly. She sat completely straight. Her eyes were a light, sharp gray. She looked like she was made of the same cold stone as the house. Her eyes moved from Mark to me. She was looking me over, thinking. I was expecting her to look cold, or maybe give a fake, polite smile. But what I saw made my stomach drop. It was recognition. For just one tiny second, her face seemed to get softer. It happened so fast I thought I dreamed it, but then she looked away, hiding her feelings behind a perfect, calm face. "Mother," Mark said, trying to sound happy, "this is Chloe Martin." Mrs. Vance just nodded one time. Her voice was calm but short. "Ms. Martin, I've heard a lot about you." The way she said "a lot" made it sound like a bad thing. "Thank you for having me, Mrs. Vance." My voice sounded strong, even though my hands were shaking. "It's an honor." We sat down. The butler poured wine. It was the kind of wine that probably cost more than I pay for rent. I reached for my napkin, and then I froze. There, resting on the back of Mrs. Vance's chair, was something I knew. It was my scarf. It was the very same navy blue cashmere scarf I had given to the woman outside the grocery store just an hour ago. It couldn't be. My brain tried to find a reason. Maybe she just bought the same one. Maybe it was just a crazy coincidence. But no. I saw the slightly worn corner and the small pull in the fabric where my bracelet had caught on it. It was my scarf. I must have turned white because Mark looked at me with a frown. "Chloe?" "I'm fine," I whispered, but I couldn't stop staring at the scarf. Mrs. Vance saw me looking. Slowly, she pulled the scarf around her shoulders. Her mouth turned up in what was almost a smile. "It's a chilly night," she said, just making conversation. "Yes," I managed to say. "It is." Dinner started. No one talked. The only sounds were the quiet clink of forks and the butler's quiet steps. The food looked amazing, roasted duck and fancy vegetables, but I couldn't taste any of it. My mind was just spinning with confusion. Was she the woman at the store? The shaky hands? The same quiet, rough voice? It all matched up. And yet it was impossible. Why would a millionaire pretend to be poor? Eleanor studied me over the top of her wine glass. I couldn't tell what she was thinking. Mark tells me you work in community outreach? Yes, ma'am, I said. I was careful to keep my voice steady. We help families who need it. Mostly veterans, people who have been forgotten. A noble cause, she said, but her voice was cold. Although I've always thought charity works best when people learn to help themselves. I smiled just a little. Sometimes they just need a little warmth to get started. Her eyes got a little sharper. Warmth, she said, repeating my word. Yes, that's a rare thing these days. Her words just hung in the air, full of meaning. Mark tried to change the subject to something safer, like the real estate market. But his mother barely answered him. She kept her attention on me, quiet and steady. By the time dessert came, my nerves were completely shot. I had never been so careful about every word I said, every move I made. The only thing that kept me calm was that scarf. It was resting on her chair like a secret between us. When the butler took our plates, Mrs. Vance put her hands on the table. Her rings flashed in the light. Ms. Martin, she said, I guess this evening has been pretty stressful for you. Yes, ma'am, I admitted. A little. She nodded slowly. I find that people show you who they really are when they are under pressure. Don't you agree? I swallowed. I suppose so. Her eyes softened again, just for a second. And then it was gone. Good, she said. Because tonight, my dear, is only the beginning. I didn't know what she meant yet. But the quiet way she said it made me feel colder than any threat could have. The moment Mrs. Vance said, "Tonight is only the beginning," the light from the fire hit the chandelier and scattered everywhere like broken glass. I could feel Mark sitting next to me. He was so tense. It was a constant feeling of fear that made it hard to even breathe. The butler cleared the dessert plates. The sound of the silverware on the plates sounded like a judge ending a trial. Mrs. Vance stood up slowly and perfectly, the scarf falling over her shoulders. Come, she said, pointing toward the next room, the parlor. We'll have our coffee by the fire. The way she said it, I knew it wasn't a choice. The parlor was amazing. The walls were covered with paintings. The shelves were full of old books. There was a big piano that looked like no one ever played it. The room smelled like polish and old money. She pointed for me to sit on a velvet sofa. Mark sat down stiffly next to me, his hands folded in his lap like a child who was in trouble. I understand, she started, that you work for a charity. The word charity sounded strange when she said it, like something that tasted bad. Yes, ma'am, I said. We help families who are struggling, mostly veterans. Ah, she said. She stirred her coffee slowly. People who have made bad choices, I guess. I swallowed, but I kept my voice polite. Some have. Others just had bad luck. Her eyes met mine. They were sharp, smart, and very familiar. And you think being nice can fix them? I think being nice is the only thing that ever does, I said, before I could even stop myself. Mark's foot tapped mine under the sofa, warning me, but Mrs. Vance just smiled a tiny bit, almost to herself. You're an idealist, she whispered. Being an idealist is dangerous in this family. The fire made a popping sound. I looked at her face in the firelight. The similarity to the woman in the grocery store was so clear now. She had the same delicate hands, the same little shake, the same soft look behind the strong face. Every part of me was screaming that it was her. But why would she be there? Why would she test me like a character in a story? The silence in the room got longer. Finally, she said, "Do you believe in fate, Ms. Martin?" "I'm not sure," I said. "But I believe people meet for a reason." Her lips curved. "So do I." Mark jumped in, trying to change the subject. "Mother, Chloe brought you something." He grabbed the flowers from a table and gave them to her, like he was offering a sacrifice. "White lilies, your favorite." Mrs. Vance took them and nodded. Then she just set them down without even smelling them. "Lovely," she said, not really paying attention. "Mark, dear, would you please go get another bottle of wine? The cellar door is just down the hall." He paused. "Mother, that wasn't a question," she said. Her eyes never left my face. When he left, the room suddenly felt much smaller. The fire hissed. She turned to look right at me, folding her hands in her lap. "Tell me, Chloe," she said. Her voice was quiet, but it was strong. "What did you do on your way here tonight?" My heart skipped a beat. "Excuse me?" "You stopped somewhere," she said. She just kept looking at me. "A store, maybe?" My heart started beating faster. I did," I said. "I needed to get a gift bag." "And," she pushed, gently, like a doctor trying to find the problem. I paused. There was no reason to lie, but something about her voice felt like this was a trap. "There was an older woman," I said at last. "She couldn't pay for her groceries, so I helped her." Mrs. Vance's eyes softened. "Helped her?" she repeated. "You mean you paid for them?" "Yes. $150. She nodded slowly. I saw a tiny bit of satisfaction on her face. "That's a lot of money to spend on a stranger." "It didn't feel like a choice," I said quietly. "Most good deeds don't," she answered. The door opened. Mark came back in, holding a bottle of wine. His hand was shaking a little. "Here it is," he said, trying to smile. Mrs. Vance stood up. "Thank you, dear. Pour us some, will you?" As he bent over to open the bottle, she turned back to me. "Chloe, do you know what I respect most in people?" I shook my head. "Consistency," she said. "How a person acts when no one important is watching." Mark laughed a little, nervously. "Mother, I'm sure Chloe—" "Be quiet, Mark," she said sharply. The air in the room felt like it froze. "You told me she was late." His face turned red. "Yes, but it wasn't that she was late. It was that she stopped to help a stranger." She finished his sentence for him. Her eyes never left mine. "Did you tell her that part?" Mark stared at her, totally confused. "How did you—" "I was there," she said simply. "I was the woman at the store." The room was completely silent. All I could hear was the fire crackling and the clock ticking. Mark just blinked, not understanding. "What are you talking about?" She turned a little, fixing the scarf on her shoulders. It was the same blue scarf I had given away hours before. "I wanted to see what kind of person my son was marrying," she said. "And now I know." I just sat there, frozen. I couldn't think of anything to say. Mrs. Vance kept talking. Her voice was calm, but I could hear something kind in it. "You didn't know who I was. You gave away what you had without even thinking about it. You failed my son's test of being on time, Miss Martin. But you passed mine." Mark's mouth dropped open. You set her up?" "I observed," she corrected him calmly, "and I learned more in 10 minutes than you have shown me in 35 years." He turned pale and looked down at the floor. Mrs. Vance looked back at me. Kindness is not very common among people who are trying to get ahead. Don't ever let anyone tell you that it's a weakness. Her words felt like warm light after a storm. For the first time all night, I felt like someone actually saw me. I didn't feel judged. I felt understood. "Thank you," I whispered. She smiled, and this time it was a real smile. "No, my dear. Thank you. Now, should we go have dinner the right way?" I nodded, still shaking a little. I followed her back to the long, shiny table. Behind us, Mark followed quietly. The sound of his footsteps was small and unsure on the hard marble floor. The night had only just started, but I already knew it would end in a way none of us had ever expected. Mark's hand tightened around his wine glass. He looked from his mother to me, completely stunned. It was like his whole world had just been turned upside down. For a minute, nobody spoke. We just heard the fire and the clock. Mrs. Vance? No, Eleanor, I thought, stayed perfectly calm. She looked peaceful, almost happy. "I wanted to see who my son was marrying," she said again. "And I wanted to see who you were when no one was watching." Mark's jaw was tight. "So you wore a costume? Mother, that's crazy." Eleanor just raised an eyebrow. "Is it? I have spent my whole life with people who smile at me when I'm in the room and then talk about me as soon as I leave. You have no idea all the fake faces I've seen, Mark. So yes, sometimes I like to meet people when they think I'm just a nobody." I sat there, frozen. My heart was pounding in my ears. My scarf, my normal little scarf, was still on her shoulders, looking like a royal robe. The woman I felt sorry for in the store never needed my money, but she had still been testing me. Eleanor turned back to me. "Tell me, Chloe, why did you do it? You didn't know who I was." I paused, trying to find words that sounded real. "Because she looked like she needed help," I finally said. "And because it didn't cost me anything that really mattered." Her lips twitched into a small smile. "You would be surprised how many people can't say that." Mark ran his hand through his hair. His voice was shaking. "Mother, this is cruel. You made her feel like she failed." "She didn't fail?" Eleanor cut him off. "She passed. You failed, Mark. You let your fear make you mean. You taught her to hide the best part of herself, when you should have been proud of it." His face turned bright red, full of shame and anger. "That's not fair." "Oh, it's perfectly fair," she said. Her voice was soft, but sharp. "You've spent your whole life trying to make me happy by being perfect, but all I ever wanted was for you to be real." The air in the room felt heavy. I could see Mark getting smaller in his chair, hiding in his silence. But I couldn't look away from her. Her eyes weren't mean. They were just truthful. Eleanor sighed, like she was letting go of years of being let down. "You remind me of someone," she said quietly to me. "My husband. Before we had all this money, before the power, he believed in people. He always used to say, 'Kindness is the only investment that never loses its value.' I guess I just wanted to see if anyone still believed that." I swallowed. "I didn't mean to pass or fail a test," I said. "I just couldn't walk past her." "That's exactly why you passed." Her look softened even more. For the first time, I saw the warmth that Mark must have known when he was a little boy, before all the money made her hard. The butler came in quietly and refilled our glasses, but the feeling in the room was still very tense. When he left, Eleanor stood up again. She took the scarf from her shoulders. She folded it neatly. Then she put it on the table right in front of me. "This is yours," she said. "I think it belongs to the right person now." I looked at the scarf. It was still warm from her. "You didn't have to," I whispered. She shook her head. "Yes, I did. Because tonight wasn't about you meeting me. It was about me meeting you." Mark slumped in his chair. His voice was so quiet I could barely hear him. "So what happens now? You just forgive her for being late and pretend everything is fine?" Eleanor's eyes flashed. "Forgive her? I should thank her. She reminded me what a good person looks like. That's something I was afraid I had almost forgotten." Mark breathed out hard, rubbing his head. "I can't believe this." "That's your problem," she said softly. "You still think this is about what you believe. It's about what you value." She turned back to me. "You see, Chloe, when you live in rooms like this for long enough, you start to forget what real kindness feels like. You start to think that people obeying you is the same as people being good. Tonight, you reminded me that true kindness still exists." I felt a lump in my throat. "Thank you, Mrs. Vance." "Please," she said gently. "Call me Eleanor. You've earned that." Mark stared at her, shocked. What do you mean she's earned?" Eleanor looked right at him, and her voice turned cold again. "If you want to stay a part of this family, Mark, you need to learn to see people for who they really are, not for what they are wearing." He looked away, ashamed. Eleanor picked up her cup again, and her voice softened. "Chloe, I know this night must have been a lot to handle, but I hope you understand why I did it." "I do," I said, and I was surprised that I really did mean it. "You wanted to know if I would still care about someone, even when it wasn't a good time for me." She smiled, but it was a little sad. "Exactly. And now I know." The silence that came next didn't feel bad. It felt like we could all finally breathe. The end of something fake was making room for the truth. After a long minute, she said, "Shall we start over?" I nodded. "I'd like that." She held her hand out across the table. I took it. Her handshake was strong, and her hand was warm. The scarf on the table between us felt like a bridge, soft and safe. Mark finally lifted his head. His eyes were wet, and he looked like he wanted to say he was sorry. But before he could say anything, his mother said quietly, "Dinner is served." And just like that, the tension was gone. The butler opened the doors, showing a second course of roasted lamb. Candles flickered all down the table. The air felt lighter and warmer. As we sat down again, Eleanor looked at me. "You see, Chloe," she said, her voice more gentle, "the world has plenty of rich people. What it doesn't have enough of is people with hearts that stay kind, even when nobody is watching." Her words stayed with me long after we finished the last plate, and the fire was almost out. I didn't know it then, but that night would be the big turning point. It wasn't just for Mark, or for her, it was for all of us. Dinner started again, but it didn't feel normal. The air in the huge dining room felt different. It wasn't tense anymore. It was like a big secret had been told. The firelight flickered on the long table and made the glasses sparkle. Eleanor Vance, the woman who had scared Mark for his whole life, wasn't just a rich, judgmental lady anymore. She was a real person. I looked at Mark. He seemed so small in his chair. His shoulders were down, and his eyes kept moving between me and his mother. He looked like a man trying to figure out a puzzle. His fork scraped his plate. "I can't believe this," he whispered, mostly to himself. Eleanor didn't even look up. "You've spent too many years believing in all the wrong things." The butler cleared our plates and gave us a small dish of lemon sorbet. The silence felt like it could break at any moment. Finally, Eleanor put her napkin down and looked right at her son. "Mark," she said softly, "do you know why I stopped trusting your opinion years ago?" His voice cracked. "Because I married the wrong woman." Her face looked a little sad, a little disappointed. "No, because you stopped listening to your own heart. You started living your life based on what things looked like. You cared about what society thought, what anyone thought, except for yourself." She turned to me. "And you, Miss Martin, you reminded me what real character looks like." My throat felt tight. "I didn't mean to prove anything." "That's exactly why you did," she said. "It's the people who don't mean to prove anything who usually pass the hardest tests in life." The room was quiet. For the first time since I got there, I felt warm. It wasn't from the fire, it was from her words. They felt deep and gentle, but strong. Mark rubbed his head, and his voice got louder. "You've been testing everyone your whole life, Mother. Business partners, family, even me. No one can ever win with you." She nodded once. "That's true. Because most people just want to win for themselves, not for a good reason. And that, my dear son, is why they always fail." He stared at her, blinking fast. "And you think she's different?" Eleanor smiled a little. "I don't think. I know." He had no answer for that. He was quiet. I could feel how ashamed he was from across the table. For his whole life, Mark had been living in this woman's shadow. He was always bent out of shape by what she wanted, always crushed when she was silent. Tonight, that shadow was finally gone. Eleanor leaned back, and her face softened. "Do you remember what your father used to say?" she asked him. Mark paused. "That life is a fight." She shook her head. "No," he said, "power without kindness is like being completely broke." "You got his drive to succeed," she said, "but you didn't get his wisdom." A tear ran down Mark's cheek. He wiped it away fast, but not before we saw it. Eleanor's voice got gentler. "Mark, my tests were never meant to break you. They were meant to wake you up. The world isn't going to remember your business reports or if you were on time for dinner. It's going to remember if you were kind when it was hard to be." He looked at her. Really looked at her. And for the first time that night, I saw the little boy she must have loved before all the fear took over. Eleanor turned to me again. "Chloe, tell me about your job. The one he told you not to talk about." I paused. Mark looked like he wanted to disappear. "Mother, please." "It's okay," I said softly. "I work for Hopeful Homes. We help veterans, single parents, anyone who is just trying to get back up. Sometimes that means I bring them groceries. Sometimes it just means I listen." Eleanor nodded slowly. She seemed genuinely interested. "And how do you pay for this organization?" "We get by on donations, some grants, and volunteers," I said. "Mostly it's people who believe that being compassionate isn't a weakness." She smiled at that. "How nice." Then she looked at Mark. "You see, my son? This is what strength looks like. The courage to care." Mark's shoulders started to shake. His voice cracked. "I was just so afraid of letting you down. I thought you wanted me to be with someone who would fit into your world." "I wanted you to be with someone who would change it," she said quietly. Her hand reached across the table and covered his. For the first time all night, he didn't pull away. You've spent years trying to get my approval, she went on. But approval doesn't mean anything. What I really wanted was to be proud. He nodded a little, his eyes wet. I understand now. She smiled sadly. Good. Then maybe you'll forgive me for all the ways I've tested you over the years. He breathed out, and it was shaky. If you can forgive me for how easily I failed them. There was a long, heavy silence, but it felt peaceful. Eleanor leaned back. Her face was soft but strong. You both remind me that it's never too late to decide what's really important. The butler refilled her glass, but she didn't drink. Instead, she looked at me again. Chloe, I hope you never change. The world doesn't need more perfect women. It needs women who still believe that kindness is important. I swallowed hard. Thank you, ma'am. That's the kindest thing anyone has ever said to me. Mark looked at me. It was a new look. It was a mix of wonder, guilt, and thankfulness all at once. He whispered, I'm sorry. I reached across the table and gently touched his hand. So am I. Eleanor stood up, putting her napkin next to her plate. Well, she said, her voice light. I think that's quite enough honesty for one night. A little bit of warm laughter went through the room. It was the kind of laugh you hear after years of silence are finally broken. As we all stood up, she looked at me one more time. Chloe, she said, if you ever get tired of working for the nonprofit, I could use someone like you at my foundation. It needs a heart again. I smiled. Maybe someday. But for right now, I think the world still needs me where I am. Then stay, she said softly, and stay exactly the way you are. She reached for her scarf, the one I had given her, and put it back around her shoulders. Not all gifts are meant to be given back, she whispered, almost to herself. For the first time, Mark smiled. It was a small smile, but it was real. You kept it. I did, she said, to remind me that money only matters when it's warm. That sentence would stay with me for the rest of my life. The weeks after that night felt like a quiet morning after a long, hard night. The world outside the Vance mansion just kept going. But something inside all of us had changed for good. Mark called his mother the next morning. He didn't call to fight. He called to say he was sorry. He told her he finally understood what she had been trying to teach him for all those years. She didn't say much back, only that she hoped he would start living like he understood. He did. It was slow and a little clumsy, but he was trying. For me, my days went back to normal. I had early mornings at hopeful homes, meetings with people giving money, and visits to veterans and families. But everything looked different. The faces of the people I met every day seemed a little brighter. Their small successes felt more important. Being kind had always been my job. Now, it felt like my purpose. A month later, Eleanor asked me to have lunch with her. Just the two of us. We met at a small cafe near the old courthouse. It was far away from the giant marble house. She wasn't wearing any jewelry, no pearls, and no scarf. She just had on a soft gray sweater, and she looked almost like a normal person. I never really thanked you, she said as soon as we sat down. I smiled. You don't have to. Yes, I do, she said. You reminded me that kindness isn't something you're supposed to plan. Somewhere, I forgot that. She stirred her tea, thinking. When my husband died, everyone around me split into two groups. There were the people who wanted me to comfort them, and the people who wanted me to approve of them. I stopped trusting both groups, but that day in the grocery store, when you had no idea who I was, You gave me something I didn't even know I had lost." "What was that?" I asked. "Faith," she said quietly. "Faith that good people still exist, even when no one is looking." We sat there in a comfortable quiet. Outside, a man was helping his old father get into a taxi. Eleanor's eyes watched them, and her face softened. "Do you still have the scarf?" I asked with a small smile. She nodded. "Every night, I hang it by my bed. It reminds me that being generous doesn't always look perfect." Her words made me feel warmer than the coffee I was holding. That weekend, Mark and I went back to my hometown to visit my parents. They live in a small, simple house that's full of old photos and always smells like fresh bread. Before, Mark had always hated the idea of visiting. He was worried my world would seem too plain. But this time, he talked with them all night. He listened to my dad's stories. He helped my mom fix her garden fence, and he laughed for the first time in weeks. Later that night, we were sitting on the porch, watching the sunset. He turned to me and said softly, "You know, I used to think that getting my mother's approval was the only thing that mattered. But that night showed me something different." "What was that?" He smiled a little. "You can't get love by trying to impress people. You get it by doing the right thing when no one is telling you to." I took his hand. For the first time, we felt like equals. We weren't two people separated by money or fear. We were just two people trying to be better. When our wedding day came, we didn't get married at the Vance estate. Eleanor insisted we shouldn't. "It's too cold there," she'd said. Instead, we got married in my parents' backyard. We were under a bunch of string lights and fall leaves. It was simple, quiet, and beautiful. Eleanor got there early. She was wearing a navy blue dress and, of course, the same cashmere scarf. She said hello to every guest, smiled for all the pictures, and cried a little during our vows. I saw her looking at me once while Mark was putting the ring on my finger. She mouthed the words, "You passed." I almost laughed while I was crying. After the wedding, she stood up to give a speech. Her voice was strong and clear, and everyone in the small crowd could hear her. "There are times in life," she said, "when we have to choose between what looks good and what feels right. I used to think the world rewards the people who just look good. Now I know that the world remembers the people who do what is right." She raised her glass to me. "To Chloe, who reminded me that when you give kindness freely, it always finds a way to come back home." Everyone clapped, but I felt a big lump in my throat. I reached up to touch the scarf on her shoulders and whispered, "Keep it." She smiled. "Oh, I plan to." That night, as the music got quiet and the lanterns moved in the wind, I thought about everything that brought me to that moment. The grocery store, the fear, the judgment, and the truth. We worry about so many tests in our lives. We worry about the tests on paper, the tests our families give us, and the tests that just seem to happen by chance. But the only tests that are really important are the ones we don't even know we're taking. They are the ones that measure our hearts when no one else is around. It's been years since that day, but every time I see someone having trouble in a checkout line or shivering while waiting for a bus, I think of Eleanor, I think of Mark, and I think of that scarf. And I think about how one small, kind act changed the story for an entire family. So, if you're reading this story right now, maybe you should ask yourself, what would you have done in that grocery store? Would you have kept walking, or would you have stopped? Sometimes the simplest choice you make is the one that changes everything. If this story meant something to you, share it with someone who believes in quiet goodness, the kind of goodness that doesn't need applause to be real. And just remember, kindness doesn't ask for attention. It just asks to be done.